This week we're going to continue talking about off-season throwing. We talked about what to do during the shutdown period, how to ramp up, and now we're getting more to the high-intensity throwing program, part of our programs with our guys in-house. Again, a little different depending on where you are in the country and when your season begins, but for our guys, the high-intensity throwing either starts at the end of this week or the beginning of next week, so I wanted to jump into that. Some of the benefits that we see, and a lot of people talk about this, about whether throwing weighted balls is dangerous or high intensity throws put you at risk of injury. Bottom line is throwing a baseball or really anything overhead does have some sort of inherent danger to it. In today's day and age, you have to basically throw 95 or above to have a chance to get drafted. So we have found the best way to do that is by using high intensity throws. Sure, getting stronger helps, being explosive helps, but really having to put it all together into this skill that happens on the field and what you would get graded for or drafted for is throwing the baseball as fast as possible, and it also correlates the best with success at the next level. So for those reasons, we want to train guys to throw hard. And what we often find is that guys don't train to throw hard, and then when they actually get to the point where they need to throw hard, like in a game, that is new stress on their body that they are not used to. So we'll get to that point in a little bit here, but that's something we want to avoid. We want to prepare our guys the best in the best way possible for whatever is going to happen on the field, whether that's something like an extreme range of motion or controlling some type of certain movement in the body, or if it's some type of very high level of stress like a max deadlift or throwing a baseball as fast as possible. So one of the first things that we look at for why we use high intensity throws and the benefits we find for them is that it teaches movement patterns. So what I mean by that is when you have to move full speed, like a pull down where you're running, crow hopping, and throwing the baseball as hard as you can, it takes a lot of coordination to do that, and you have to synchronize your movements in a way that you don't fall over, that you're able to move fast as possible, plant your lead leg, rotate through that lead leg, and throw the ball forward. So when we're moving as fast as possible, when we do these with a radar gun, the radar gun is telling us how successful we were at doing this movement or doing this movement pattern. Guys that do not do well with something like the lead leg block while they're running full speed, they're not going to throw as hard as guys that do. Also, variating from throw to throw, or variance from throw to throw, is something that we see with guys, especially younger guys, where one throw will be really good, they synchronize really well, next throw they might get going a little too fast, mess up their shuffle a little bit, just get a little out of tilt, and the number drops 3 miles an hour. That's a great indicator to say, hey, you did not do what you did, or you did not create the movement patterns as well as you did the throw before. So that's something we look for, is can we take these movement patterns that we learn at a lower level, like we talked about during the on-ramping phase, and can we apply them to a max speed situation like that would happen in a game. Also, with doing something like this in a pull-down type setting or something where they're not throwing a pitch, we're also helping the athlete to remove them from the environment that they're most comfortable in, so to speak. We find that the worst place to teach a mechanical change or to try to change movement pattern is on the mound, because that's what they've been doing for their last 16 years or however long they've been throwing a baseball. They're used to moving on the mound a certain way. They get on the mound and they're much more likely to revert back to their old movement patterns. So we want to remove them and put them in a max speed environment to see if they can start changing their patterns there. And if they can do that there, they should have a better chance of carrying them over to the actual pitching mound. Number 2 would be high training stress equals increased tissue adaptation. We've talked about this a little bit before, one of the other whiteboard episodes, talking about really the role of PT and how we want to, at some point, if you get injured, then your tissue, the strength of your tissue is less than the stress that is applied to you during whatever the sports competition is that got hurt, in this case throwing baseball. The tissue strength of your elbow is less, your tissue capacity is less than the stress of throwing a baseball puts on your elbow. So we want to try to maximize the stress in the safest way possible to increase that tissue adaptation, increase that tissue capacity, that tissue strength, just like we would with like a bicep curl if you're trying to look better. Or if we're trying to compete for a powerlifting competition, we're working on squats, then we want to increase that training stress to be as high as it would be in that competition. So when you go into that competition, your body's not like, what's going on? This is the first time I've ever had stress at this level. I'm not ready for it. And either you shut down and lose performance, or something snaps, so to speak, or your tissue gets out. So we want to take them in a training environment, build them up, and actually try to get stress that's going to be a little bit higher than it would be in a game. So for instance, doing a pull down with a 3-ounce baseball is causing more stress than what would be caused from throwing a 5-ounce baseball off of a mound. So that's something, and we do that in microdoses and build up. So they might have 2 throws the first time they ever do this with a 3-ounce baseball, and as opposed to like 75 when you're pitching in a game, and that would start building up that stress. We're not throwing them in there and being ridiculous about it and say, hey, throw this 3-ounce baseball 60 times in a pull down session or something ridiculous like that. We're starting with a very low volume and slowly building up a little bit, but now they're exposed to this level of stress that they've never been exposed to before, and hopefully it should carry over and build up that tissue so they're ready to compete and not have any type of injury, or at least mitigate the chance of injury as much as humanly possible when dealing with throwing. The last thing that we like the high intensity throws for, and I put this third on purpose, is raising the velocity ceiling. So it is last on purpose. We look at these other 2 things first. I mean, it's pretty simple that, you know, if we're looking at, if you say you pitch at your 90%, so you're constantly throwing at 90%, and your top velocity there is 88. Okay. Well, if we can raise that, do the same thing, but now we're throwing at 90% of 92, that number is going to be higher, obviously, right? So while we might not throw at max effort every single pitch or in a game, you're not going to be out of control, or you know, you're more worried about throwing a strike, you're more worried about getting hit or out than just putting up a number. If we can raise the ceiling, then we see that where you can pitch in a game should be higher than what it was right here, if that's your the best number that you've ever thrown or the number you've topped out at. So by training these patterns, getting the movement pattern, increasing the stress, and having the tissue adaptations available, then we can look to, because of those things, we can raise the ceiling and hopefully help the person throw a little bit harder. And then when they're cruising at their 90-95%, that number is also higher in a game. So because of all these reasons, it's something we use. We take a long time to build someone up to doing high intensity throws. It's also, we look at all the factors we talked about as far as the off-season throwing programs go and whether to shut down or not. Is a high school senior who needs to throw harder to have a chance to play in the spring and it's December, or is it a freshman who is on track to potentially get a Division I scholarship? Obviously, those are 2 different time paths and 2 different risk-reward factors that go in for each player. So, you know, this isn't something we kind of haphazardly prescribe to someone. We do a ton of stuff in the weight room before we start exposing them to the high-intensity throws. But I think it's something that overall still has a negative viewpoint from a lot of people, and the worry of getting hurt, one is not true. If you build them up properly, then you're going to mitigate that risk a lot. And 2, it's holding athletes back because, again, you have to throw 95 to have a chance to get drafted now. And if you're not doing some of these things for most people, more of the average man, if you're not taking or training in this high intensity of environment, you're not going to be able to do that. So again, something to look at. Don't jump into it feet first or head first and try to go into it without doing these other type of on-ramping or build-up periods with your body, but it's something that almost everyone should do. So as always, if you have any questions specifically about how we build our athletes up or exactly how we do our high-intensity throws, please reach out. You can leave a comment. You can send us an email. Whatever you need, happy to help, and hope this helps.